Thank you, Roger. My name is Philip Murphy, and I am honored to have co-chaired this task force with Governor Napolitano and Professor Wilkins, and also to have served with the colleagues present here today and the few who could not be with us. I also want to reiterate our collective and deep thanks to the staffs from both the Institute and from the Center for American Progress, as well as the sponsorship for those organizations, which have been invaluable in our process. We've heard a lot already today from the Governor, from Professor Wilkins, about the condition that our education system is in and the rapidly evolving world around us. I believe we've made a compelling case for change. Now, I would like to walk you through our proposals for change, proposals in our judgment that will fully prepare students for the 21st century. As John mentioned earlier, the 7 task force members who share the stage today all spent, as well as some who could not be here, a fair amount of time together over the past 18 months as we traveled around the country looking for innovative and successful efforts to address our nation's educational challenges. In the end, we concluded that it's past time for a change and that this change has to start with time. So that's where we begin. Our recommendations are grouped into 4 buckets. In the report itself, these recommendations follow a thorough discussion of challenges that they are designed to address. Obviously, I can't discuss all of the challenges today, but I do want to outline our recommendations in some detail. The first big bucket of task force recommendations is that our schools must offer more learning time and make better use of it. American children don't spend enough time in school. They don't start young enough. They don't continue in formal education long enough, and they don't spend as much time in school as kids in other countries do. In other words, we need more time on task. Our task force is recommending a focus on time in 3 distinct ways. First, the traditional use of the K-12 public school years needs to be overhauled. Second, all students need to start earlier with preschool for all. And third, all students should have the opportunity to continue their studies longer by having access to and obtain a college education or post-secondary occupational credential. With regard to the universal K-12 system that we have, we specifically recommend that states transform learning time. First, by extending the school day to meet student needs and interests, whether through after-school programs and organized activities, or merely through longer school days, and by reorganizing the school year to span over 12 months with short intersession breaks that offer voluntary tutoring or enrichment programs, rather than including only 9 months with a long summer vacation. It makes no sense to continue our school year structure that was designed for an agricultural era, given what we now know about student learning loss over the summer, especially for disadvantaged youngsters, and the difficulties that working parents have in arranging positive and affordable activities for their kids when school is out. We also recommend that states transform learning time in continually low-performing school districts by providing an extra 30 days of schooling and by holding school district officials accountable for significantly improved results. The federal government should help fund extra learning time in these districts and provide technical assistance, materials, and personnel to assist educators in their transition to these organizational improvements. We call for this because if students in continually low-performing school districts are to have a chance at catching up and meeting standards, they will need much more time engaged in constructive learning activities. We also must ensure that all children enter school ready to learn, and that means beginning schooling at an earlier age. The task force recommends that all 3- and 4-year-olds, beginning with low-income and minority children who need it most, have access to universal, high-quality pre-kindergarten and then full-day kindergarten, paid for with a combination of federal, state, local, and private dollars. Today, only 20% of American 3- and 4-year-olds attend state-sponsored preschools or Head Start programs. Our task force found it striking that both the proportion of children in preschool and those supported by public funds in the United States is lower than most European countries. In addition to making preschool more widely available, students should have access to full-day kindergarten. About 60% of the nation's school children attend full-day kindergarten already, but access is not consistent. Only 9 states require districts to offer full-day programs, and just 2 states, Louisiana and West Virginia, require a full-day kindergarten for every student. Finally, we must extend time on task by ensuring that every student is academically prepared for study beyond high school and by assuring that advanced study is affordable. We today fall far short on both. To reverse this, we recommend that policymakers and educators must undertake the radical redesign of high schools and their relationship with post-secondary institutions. There is some very exciting work on high school redesign being undertaken around the country. Our task force was particularly intrigued by a proposal for a set of 3, quote, fast track to college, quote, courses of study made by Hillary Pennington in a paper which we commissioned. These pathways would take the place of the traditional senior year of high school. They include an academic head start on college, an accelerated career/technical college, and a gap year slash college in the community. Taken together, these 3 options would provide students with earlier exposure to the world beyond high school, and in some cases actually give them a head start on earning credits toward a post-secondary credential. It also goes without saying that it saves money for the student. Policymakers and educators must also assure that every student is prepared for and has access to college by boosting need-based grants and loans to better align financial aid with the alarming rise in college costs. Over the next 3 years, the maximum Pell Grant should be raised so that it covers as much as it did 2 decades ago, 50% of the average tuition, fees, room and board at 4-year public universities. In subsequent years, Pell Grants should increase at the same rate as the average annual cost increases at 4-year public universities. Policymakers and educators must also provide incentives for preparation for science and technological jobs, the crisis of which the governor outlined quite well. In specific, the Pell Grant program should be used to expand the science and technology workforce by providing eligible students with an additional $5,000 annually if they pursue math, science, or engineering. Additional efforts should be made to encourage the enrollment of students of color and women who, for a variety of reasons, are underrepresented in these areas. Finally, policymakers and educators must work aggressively to redirect school dropouts back into learning environments that lead to an employment credential. If we accomplish these 3 big changes in how we use learning time, we must simultaneously assure high-quality uses of this time. Doing more of the same ineffective things would be silly. Consequently, our task force has 3 other buckets of recommendations. The second recommendation bucket addresses the need for high expectations, voluntary national standards, and accountability for all students' learning. Specifically, we recommend that the federal government support the crafting, adoption, and promotion of voluntary, rigorous national curriculum standards in core subject areas so that students can succeed in every academic setting and in both the national and global marketplaces. Our task force was particularly disturbed by the variation in standards and measurement systems state to state. The proportion of students achieving at the proficient level on national measures, such as the National Assessment of Educational Progress Test, can vary greatly from the proportion attaining proficiency on state achievement tests. Students who appear to be proficient by their own state standards may actually not be getting the education they need to excel in another state, much less in the global economy. The task force also recommends expanding national accountability measures through fair measurements that go beyond standardized tests, while assisting low-performing schools and districts. And finally, we recommend in this bucket the initiation of a national conversation, not only about the importance of standards and accountability, but also the need for paying sufficiently and equitably for public schooling, including modern and safe facilities from preschool through college. Over the past 2 decades, the issues of national standards, national tests, and education finance and equity have been subject to national debate, but never simultaneously nor in a sustained way. Our third recommendation bucket addresses getting highly qualified teachers into every classroom and strong, effective leaders for every school. Teachers matter most in fostering student learning. Research has shown that in public schools, teacher quality has a greater effect on student learning than low levels of parental education, poverty, race, or other attributes believed to put children at risk. The task force recommends, therefore, that states and local school districts, with support from federal financial incentives, should first restructure and upgrade preparation programs and on-the-job training opportunities for teachers and school leaders, and hold these programs accountable for producing effective teachers. Second, redesign their compensation and career advancement systems to reward effective teachers and school leaders through fair performance measures. And third, to hold all school leaders and teachers accountable for adding value to their students' learning. In a free market economy that rewards talent and dedication, teachers should be paid more if districts and schools wish to attract high-quality and highly motivated candidates. But today's teachers' compensation systems largely ignore the marketplace. Potential teacher candidates, as well as experienced teachers, make daily decisions in the employment marketplace that have contributed to a crisis in attracting and retaining the best and the brightest to teaching. The task force recommends basing a proportion of pay on a teacher's skills and knowledge and on teacher success in increasing student achievement. We also recommend significant financial incentives for teachers to work in the most challenging schools or in subject areas with shortages. We must guarantee the equitable distribution of high-quality teachers through strategies such as incentive pay, aggressive mentoring of new teachers, and improved working conditions. These efforts are fundamental to, among other objectives, cutting down on teacher turnover in our most challenging schools. The task force's fourth and final bucket of recommendations concerns the crucial effort to connect schools with families and communities, to which Roger referred earlier. Students are most likely to excel when schools, families, and communities work together to ensure that challenges students face outside the classroom are addressed rather than remaining as ongoing barriers to student learning and achievement. Establishing a strong foundation for learning begins before birth and starts with families. Children with adequate health care, housing, parental support, and nutrition are better prepared to learn. However, all too often, low-income children and children of color start preschool and kindergarten behind their more advantaged peers and face continual challenges in their homes and communities. The task force recommendations in this area include that there be increased state and federal support for the establishment of community schools that connect students and family to social services. Community schools reshape the structure of traditional schools and recast their roles in the community by explicitly positioning schools, families, and communities as vital partners in fostering the health, well-being, and academic growth of children. They are typically open before and after regular school hours and on the weekends. For students, these hours are used for quality after-school programs that foster not only academic achievement, but also students' social, cultural, and emotional growth. These schools also bring in parents and families and build relationships with supportive community organizations and institutions. In addition to promoting more community schools, states should guarantee that every child receives early screening for developmental and physical challenges and develop solutions to address any challenges identified. Early indication or identification of conditions, for example, autism or vision impairment, provides more time and a greater chance for children to receive services to treat their condition. It is estimated that these early intervention programs save a society a significant sum of money, perhaps somewhere between $30,000 to $100,000 based on research per child. Children and families who face higher risks should receive professional home visits to provide additional assistance and, as needed, effective interventions. Finally, teachers must receive greater training in how to better engage parents as partners in the learning process. Now, I have outlined a comprehensive agenda here, and honestly speaking, it will not come cheaply. We are calling for a $325 billion federal government investment over the next 10 years, beginning with an initial annual investment of $7 billion that would rise to $39 billion annually at full implementation in 2010. This money will go toward everything I've outlined earlier. While this is by any measure a lot of money, we expect large returns on our investment. The payoff from these investments should be substantial. Give you one example. Art Rolnick of the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis estimates that for every $1 invested in pre-kindergarten, we will see a social return on investment of at least $7 and perhaps as high as $10. Researchers have estimated that a 1% increase in high school graduation rate would produce savings of approximately $1.4 billion annually associated with the cost of crime, or about $2,100 for each male high school graduate. We fully expect that if our proposals are completely implemented, American society would realize even greater savings, both efficiencies within the broad basket of educational spending and, more importantly, in other societal savings. If all we were asking for is more spending on the education system of our past, the one that hasn't worked well for so many, then we wouldn't deserve to have our request answered. We are not. We have recommended a dramatic new approach to scale education and a new investment paradigm, which seeks increased federal dollars to leverage much more learning time and realize much higher expectations, which takes aggressive steps to improve the quality of teaching, and which connects with families and communities so that they can enhance their children's learning opportunities. We are convinced our recommendations, if well implemented, will work to better prepare all students for an ever more competitive world at large, and will close wide and persistent learning gaps within our American world. As John Kennedy once said, quote, "There are risks and costs to a program of action, but they are far less than the long-range risks and costs of comfortable inaction." Has there ever been a topic better suited to that wisdom than the state of public education in this country, wherein comfortable inaction, if unaddressed, leads ever so quietly yet resolutely toward widening gaps between America's haves and have-nots and a slipping of the American civilization into the globe's second division? My co-chairs and colleagues and I are ready to take your questions and any comments. We're sure you've got some of each. Before you do, I believe this was mentioned earlier, but you have received a companion piece, which we are also releasing today, Education, the State We're In, which provides a comprehensive state-by-state snapshot of education today in America. It brings together publicly available data on 7 pressing issues in education that are addressed in our report, and then it analyzes each one of the 50 states. You also have a prototype 8-page, I believe, summary for the state of Virginia, Commonwealth of Virginia, And both organizations hope, I think, quite soon to have 8-page, full-blown analyses for each of the 50 states available. With that, we would very much welcome your questions. I've been asked to moderate this, so I will do so.